Welcome to all of you. I'm not sure that you can really imagine how happy I am to welcome you in this information session on this Green Deal call. I am also, on behalf of Maria Gabriel and of course on behalf of the entire Commission, very proud to open now this process to see research and innovation funded still in the Horizon 2020 make a real difference in bringing the Green Deal forward. Just a few days ago, the Commission confirmed that we believe we can move to 55% reduction in CO2 by 2030. This is ambitious, but as you have seen in the Commission analysis and in our new proposals, this is a distinct possibility and the way forward. It will require, of course, a lot of additional investments, and it will require that we deploy solutions and technology. And this is what this Green Deal call is largely about. It is not so much about the frontiers of science. It's not so much about finding new knowledge and new instruments. It's much more about using what has been developed largely, not only, but largely in Horizon 2020 and test it, demonstrate it. Of course, as technologies, economically, as we often do, but also with a different dimension this time, which is to also see whether these solutions work for society. So there will be a lot of attention put in the call also on social innovation and experimentation. So it's an amazingly ambitious call. We managed to bring together at the very end of Horizon 2020 €1 billion across all the programs. So everyone in the Commission is part of this effort. And this, I think, is critical mass with you to demonstrate, test, deploy, and really allow already now to show that moving to 55% will happen by 2030. So this is all about the future, all about making a difference. Bernd Bierwert, who coordinated this in my teams, John Bell, and of course all my colleagues in the agencies are now of course available to complete the presentation and then to answer all your questions. I hope that we will have as many proposals as we have had feedback when we consulted on the call. More than 6,000 of you came back to us with ideas and suggestions at the time of COVID-19, which was in itself quite spectacular. So again, I'm delighted that the session is taking place, and I wish you a very productive afternoon, and I'm very much looking forward to see your ideas, proposals, and impact. Merci à tous.
Thank you very much, Jean-Éric. Good afternoon, dear colleagues. After these introductory words, I just wanted to say I'll be your moderator for this session. My name is Bernd Bierwert. I'm working in the directorate of John Bell. And I would like to give you just a little bit of heads up on the session which is awaiting us. It's a very timely organization. You know that the call has been adopted last Thursday and just been launched so that applications can be sent. So it's very, very timely that we can have the info session with you. John will give you an insight into the Green Deal call, and I'm very honored and pleased that you are with us, John. Hello. You are the director, Healthy Planet. Actually, you have been the driving force behind this massive call, making sure that we are co-creating this with a broad consultation with you together. So we'll be very much looking forward to listen to you from a strategic point of view. We will then have the opportunity to have a Q&A session with you, John. I would like to ask you, dear participants, that you ask questions which are related to the political context, to the strategic objectives of the call. I'm saying this because, as you know from the program, we are going to have in the second part of this session, our dear colleagues from the executive agencies with us who will be talking more in detail on the implementation details. And we have in the second part of the session then 10 different sessions on the details of the thematic areas. So with John, it's really an opportunity to look at the political context, at the strategic objectives. Before I pass the floor to John, I would also like to say we have seen that many of you who are so interested, gratefully for the call, are already pitching your interest. And I wanted to just to let you know, and you have seen it in the program, that we have a specifically dedicated session tomorrow. It's the so-called brokerage event from 9/11. So there is the place where you can pitch the ideas and take the floor. We will put the link now here in the chat function, and there you can also book a meeting. So please don't pitch now your organization and your ideas in this part of the session. Enough of my introductory words, and I would like now to give the floor to you, John. Please.
Thanks, Bernd. I'm going to stand up and move around for a little bit. That's okay. So I'm John Bell. I'm the director of the Healthy Planet team. No pressure, you can imagine, having that as your objective. And with Bernd and Art and Jean-Eric and our Commissioner Gabrielle, today's launch, which is a huge opportunity for our research and innovation community, is also an opportunity for people to see an answer to the question that was posed to us by the generation that were up on our streets this time last year, the kids in the schools across Europe who are asking and demanding urgent action. Now, you know from the European Union that President von der Leyen has told us the European Green Deal, a carbon neutral Europe by 2050, working within planetary boundaries, is what the European Union is for the next 30 years. And those of us who've been involved in research and innovation, transforming our options for the future and wondering how could we actually muster the ideas, the inspiration, the innovation, and the alignment and collaboration, what is it that we could do quickly to start to move forward in making some of these transitions not just possible, but inevitable? So a little bit of a story at the beginning, how we got into this. We have the schools were passing by our buildings on their way to the Parliament to protest from all over Belgium and Europe. And we would talk with the colleagues who were there and the young people who were there, and to hear what it was that they were looking for. And we were in the Arctic Council about this time last year, and they said, look, you guys who are doing the science and the innovation, who've explained to people what the problem is, can you put some solutions on the table? Can you show us some ideas? We took this conversation back, and Jean-Eric and my colleagues had a long discussion about what is the best thing that we can do. And we decided to go for showing what research and innovation, our communities of practice and thought and experimentation, what they can do to kickstart this massive transition upon which so much depends for our society, for our economy, and indeed for our planet. So the call today is really a different kind of moment. It comes at the very end of Horizon 2020, which I think you'll all agree has been a hugely successful opportunity for people to build great solutions together. It's not just about the development of new technologies or the sustainable solutions and disruptive innovation that is typical of what we do and that is critical to the Green Deal, but it's also about how research and innovation can really be an enabler that can drive, navigate, and accelerate this new Green Deal agenda, which has got to be transformative. Research and innovation here is being asked to step up from being the people with the ideas and the thinking in the background to the people who are setting the direction, convening the ideas and the actors, and developing new pathways. It's a big, long-term systemic change we have to undertake, and we need to find new ways to make it look as if it's possible, how to do it, who needs to be involved, how it can be grounded in our communities, our democracies, our economies, and in a way that leaves nobody behind, which is a very important point that Vice President Timmermans made. So why are we launching this call now? You know that we have a budget of €1 billion behind this call. This in itself is a very significant symbol of this European Green Deal call's importance for the institution as a whole. It's been put together by colleagues from across all of the different Commission policy services, areas and agencies, and it's an attempt to address, before the start of Horizon Europe, the need to confront the climate crisis and the planetary boundary issues and the changes that are needed to give greater protection to the continent's environment and biodiversity at the same time. We cannot wait for another year to get started. Now, it may be the case that when you see a lot of our scientists saying we are running out of time, we may be running out of time in some of the areas, but we're certainly not running out of ideas. And that is what this call is about, is to get the brightest and the best across Europe to bring their solutions to bear on how do we meet this equally urgent challenge of getting things moving. It's linked, of course, to the big socioeconomic challenge that we're facing in moving out of the post-COVID phase in the months and years ahead. Recovery, as has been made clear by the Commission and the European Union and its member states, has to be about building back a better economy, a fairer society, and a more green and sustainable way of doing business, and to lead the world in doing that and generate more work and jobs for people on the ground. So this is also an attempt to kickstart some of the areas that may lead to very important pathways in bringing the recovery plan of Europe to bear on this new pathway towards a sustainable future. We know that this call will be different also. When you see it, it's not like your traditional framework program call. Some aspects of it you'll be familiar with. It's really focused about impact. It's focused about making an impact on these big issues that are there. It's organised according to the main priorities of the European Green Deal policy of the European Union. And the topic areas match those for the green recovery. So the framing, if you like, comes from this Green Deal mission, which is that of the European Union's raison d'etre for the next generation. And it's organised according to the 8 chapters of the Green Deal policy. So you'll see the European Green Deal call will be identified as the key instrument. And indeed, it is the first action, tangible and funded, to deliver on the Commission's green recovery. And I think Commissioner Gabriel's support and the colleagues in the Commission's support has been important in showing that research and innovation is not simply about great ideas that will have an impact tomorrow. It can force and set direction, de-risk and demonstrate what is possible now. The structure of the call is really about a complementary approach. The call has been structured in a way to order explicitly, as I say, the priorities of the European Green Deal. There are 20 topics. These are distributed in 10 thematic areas. So the call is structured around the 8 main themes and 2 other thematic areas. The first 8 areas correspond exactly to the 8 work streams of the European Green Deal. Climate, energy, clean industry and the circular economy, buildings, renovation wave, clean mobility, farm to fork, biodiversity, zero pollution and a toxic-free environment. And these areas will absorb about 90% of the overall budget. The actions in these areas have a relatively short-term perspective with a clear impact-focused approach. And this is also different. We need impact, and if we get impact with this call, it will open up other areas of research, innovation, alignment, and scaling up down the line. So this is a relatively shorter-term approach in terms of what is being looked for than our traditional calls. They'll support the development of ideas into pilot applications and demonstration projects, innovative products, experiments and approaches, able to show their value in practice and be ready for further scale-up. We have to be able to demonstrate that where we need to go is not just possible, but is actually usable, demonstratable, scalable, socially acceptable, and from a planetary point of view, sustainable. They're going to be complemented, these 8 areas will be complemented by 2 horizontal areas, strengthening knowledge and empowering citizens, which offer a longer-term perspective in support of the transformations required by the Green Deal. These areas will strengthen our knowledge capacity and will lead to experimentation and, critically, to social innovation for new ways to engage civil society and empower consumers. Wherever you've been for the last few months, you'll know that the conversations that have shaped our lives in this COVID crisis have been conversations, meeting with people that we hardly meet in the normal run of events, looking at our environment afresh, looking at the challenges there, and realizing that people really want to be involved in shaping the solutions for the next generation. So research and innovation has to encourage and enable the kind of ways in which society can be engaged and innovation can be socialized and grounded, because everything takes place in real places where people live and work and not in abstract environments when we're talking about successful democratic and evidence-based changes. Because we're talking about very significant adaptations in lifestyles and behavior in the places that we live and work. I cycle to work every morning, and if you look at the interaction between cyclists and traffic, you can see that there's a lot of things that are going to have to be socialized in the way in which we live and work. And there are examples of that in many of these changes, some of which will be very, very different. We have to, in this call, imagine what the destination will look like, where we will live, how we will live, what kind of environment we would want to have, what kind of housing, what kind of way would we want our energy to be, what kind of way do we want to have our economy functioning more for the benefit of everybody and not just of the few. So research and innovation here is a call that goes beyond the normal calls, but it will in a way be paving the way for some of the key innovations in Horizon Europe, which is the next big program, which our member states are signing off in terms of the budget of our taxpayers as a key driver of these transitions. We're not just going to be limited, of course, to the Green Deal call that we're talking about today. Horizon Europe, which will be for the period 2021 to 2027, will be supported, for example, by the European Innovation Council, which will incite a new wave of research and innovation in a lot of these sectors for startups and for bringing those startup ideas to the market. In climate science, renewable energy, energy storage, carbon neutral and circular industries, clean and decarbonised mobility, bio-based industries, new areas for the food system, the built environment, biodiversity, and these great new renovation ways for buildings and restoration ways for our ecosystems. We will also be allocating about 35% of the Future Horizon Europe programme to support the achievement of the climate goals, with a dedicated climate, energy and mobility cluster, while the clusters on food, bioeconomy, natural resources, agriculture and environment, and on industry and digital will contribute significantly to climate action and the other work streams of the European Green Deal. So these are the orientations, the navigation points, if you like, the GPS that we'll need in the years to come, that we'll be using all of the instruments of the European Union to deliver. And Horizon Europe is no exception. One last point about Horizon Europe. Many of you will have been participating in the sessions in these R&I days about the launch of the missions. There are 5 missions being launched, 5 moonshot ideas for research and innovation, 4 of which are directly related to the European Green Deal. On healthy oceans, seas, coastal and inland waters, Starfish 2030, climate neutral and smart cities, 100 climate neutral and smart cities by 2030, restoring our soil health in the food system, and the adaptation to climate change, including societal transformation. These are 4 huge moonshot ideas, or earthshot ideas, if you want to use that term, about how we can fundamentally use research and innovation to kickstart and align other policies to bring to bear the kind of destinations that we want. The clean water systems, the carbon neutral cities, the restored soil, and the cleanup of our ecosystems. Our oceans and water systems, where there'll be enough water, not too much, not too little, in the climate adaptation ahead. I'd encourage you to have a look at these mission documents which have been published this week and think about them carefully, because they too will need to be supported both by some of the initiatives that you'll see in the Green Deal call today and by the first movements in the Horizon Europe areas. So all I can say to you is exploit this moment. It's a unique opportunity, not just for us to do what we're great at doing in the European Union with our partners around the world, but it's an opportunity to do something in response to the generation that has said to us, what are you going to do about making this transition happen? Thank you.
Thank you very much, John, for this really strategic, deep insight into the Green Deal call. And you have not completely exhausted your speaking time, which gives gratefully even more time to you, dear participants, now to actively engage in the discussion with you. If I may just recall, given the program, we will later discuss with our colleagues from the executive agencies the implementation aspects. We have then in the closed sessions the possibility to discuss with you very much in detail the thematic issues. And we have tomorrow, as I said, from 9 to 11, the brokerage event. I see on the chat bar there's a lot of pitching going on, and I fully understand your interest. It's very encouraging to see that you want to actively participate in this call. But for the purpose of this Q&A session, this is not the place. Please be as active on the pitching tomorrow. John, I just got the information. There are more than 3,000 people online following us. I think it's very encouraging for your work, for our work on the call. So if I could ask you to focus the questions along what John was explaining to us. So the importance of R&I for the Green Deal. Why are we launching the call exactly now? You mentioned something about the structure mirroring the Green Deal call, but also what is the role of R&I beyond the call? You were referring to Horizon Europe and Mission. So I would suggest that we are focusing on this. I'm getting the first question via Slido. My glasses are not that good that I can identify the name, but it's from DLR. Hello. But I can read the question to you, John, thanks to my glasses. So he's asking if the call is focusing on making use of developments from Horizon 2020. Is this seen to terminate creating further new ideas?
Thanks for the question. I think what we have to do in this call, and you're putting together your teams to respond to the call, is think about what works. What can actually answer the challenges that are being set out in these 10 different areas and topics that are, 20 topics that are there. And whether you've learned something in Horizon 2020 or about to capitalize on that or take it forward at a higher level, or whether you see a radically new way of answering it, please be bold, be innovative, be connected, and of course be sustainable. I don't think there's any received thinking here about what the answers to these should be. This is a unique call and a unique set of circumstances. Anonymous is asking about short-term perspectives. Hi Anonymous, you've been very busy this week. How long do you envisage projects to approximately run? I think what you will see is the projects run for the usual time frame in framework programs, but the impacts, of course, will be different depending on the nature of the project. If you're dealing with moving a technology solution up the technological readiness level, that is a more quantifiable deliverable. But if you're talking about putting in place the kind of social innovative infrastructure or approaches, then of course the impacts will be longer. I'm sure our colleagues who are working in the agencies to deliver on all of this will have some clear ideas as to how this is to be made, of course, a manageable project from the point of view of evaluation and implementation.
Thank you very much, John. I'm seeing that there are some questions which are more of technical nature. So where can you find the Green Deal call? Indeed, it's on our tender and funding portal. Colleagues here in the team, they can put the link also in the chat function. John, there was a question. I can say that you are from Ireland. There's a question.
It's no secret.
Horizon 2020. Can UK still participate in the call? May I?
Well, I think you have to ask the UK that. I think all of us are working and hoping for the best possible outcome, and we're not yet in a position to see what the outcome of the discussions will be. Those of us in research innovation don't believe in frontiers or boundaries. We believe in bridges and collaboration. So let's just hope for the best, and we will have some clarification, I think, by the time the call closes. I imagine this will be abundantly clear. The normal situation is when we have agreements in place that will be possible. We can maybe come back to this, get an exact legal clarification for you on that. But as you know, that's a bit of a work in progress, to use an understatement.
Indeed, yeah. And as we are talking about Horizon 2020, so for the time being, participation, possible, and then Horizon Europe, that's a new framework program. I'm looking at a Slido. Another anonymous, John, you are very popular among anonymous participants. The call describes the need for systemic solutions. We have been very much putting the focus indeed on this, but how are systemic solutions defined in the context of the Green Deal as such?
Well, you can have a look at the specific text which people will take you through. You can have something which is a systemic solution in that it has a systemic impact. I think about the hydrogen electrolyzer topic, which is one of the key bottlenecks in taking forward the European Union's commitment to scale up, in particular, green hydrogen. That's a specific problem that needs to be solved, but the solving that problem will have an immense systemic impact on the future. There are other aspects of the call which are systemic by design. So if alongside the renovation call, which is to do with energy efficient buildings and materials and so forth, you can see there are other calls there. For example, there's one which is a restoration call, a nature-based solution call, which is looking at how to do ecosystems or parts of our environment that would require working along an ecosystem. It could be a river, it could be an ecosystem of another kind, where the nature of the area in which the research and innovation will take place would be across a system. There are, of course, other aspects when we're dealing with circular aspects or nutrient systems and so forth, where the whole system of the cyclical nature of the economy comes into mind. So you will see it's very specific to each of the different challenges that the Green Deal policies behind them set out. And this is why the way in which it was cooked, if you like, we had about 16 DGs across the Commission really shaking the tree, reading the policy documents, having internal discussions and seeing, what would be the most important, impactful contribution from research and innovation in the short to medium term in this particular area. And that's where some will be systemic by design, some by impact, and some by practice.
Thank you very much, John. I see another anonymous question, and it's referring what you said in your presentation when you were describing what is the difference in this call. What does it distinguish from other Horizon 2020 calls? You were putting the focus that it's focused on yielding tangible results in relatively short time, and this is also the question short-term perspective. So how long do you envisage projects to approximately run? And this is also a question we discussed, remember, in the program committees from different member states. Can you say something on this?
Well, you can tell me what we said in the program committee to stay on message. But I think the intention of the call is to have an impact in the coming decade, which is not normally what we're doing in research and innovation. Most of the goals are going to require, by 2030, there are already the changes in place that can then be scaled up for the big push between 2030 and 2055. Jean-Éric Paquet, when he opened, talked about this very ambitious shift to 55% reduction in greenhouse gases by 2030. Fit for 55 is the phrase people are using. This is an enormous challenge, but a lot of things are actually moving forward and can move forward even more quickly if we can start seeing the knowledge, the technological solutions, the application of those solutions, and the potential scaling up and marketization and socialization of solutions, which are not just going to be technical, they'll be behavioral, organizational, geographic and so forth, and ecological, that they need to be up and running in the course of this decade. So it'll be very different in that sense. I mean, the projects will be the normal kind of duration that you will get in the evaluation and administration of projects. There will be some which, of course, by definition, where they're more knowledge-based, where we're trying to complete knowledge gaps or trying to understand what kind of infrastructure or approaches need to be built, will by definition have a longer-term impact. I mentioned social innovation, social engagement. There's some very important, I see there's a question here about inclusion, equity and justice in the European Green Deal calls, which has got to be hardwired into the way both that we build the projects that go forward and engage with people in different parts of society, in different places, in different parts of Europe. And I think part of that, there's a number of aspects of the two horizontal, if you like, parts of the call, where we'll be looking at issues like education and knowledge and the kind of advice and access that people need to have in all parts of Europe, wherever you come from, whatever your situation is, to make these transitions possible. And I think part of that, the kind of infrastructure we're going to need to make these changes. Remember, I come from a city called Dublin, and you can look at a city like Dublin and say, well, in 30 or 40 years' time, the buildings in the city need to be like this, okay? The energy in the city needs to be like this, okay? But what are we going to do with the sea level rise? How do we organise ourselves in a city of 1 million people to work out what we want to do about that? And that's not going to be solved simply by somebody saying, we put this piece of technology here, that piece of technology there. We need new ways for people where we come from, which is Europe is a place, it's not simply an idea and a series of places, to be able to develop the ways in which they can deliberate on what are very long-term decisions and big investments and big choices. And we're coming to some really big forks in the road. And they're not going to be decided by, people like us who are doing our best, either people working for the Commission or working in research innovation. They will have to be discussed and worked out by communities, by regions, by national systems. So there, I think there's a lot of work that's going to have to be done, which have a much longer term perspective on how are we going to develop, if you like, the kind of societal, democratic and innovative infrastructure of the future that each and every place will be able to have access to as each and every place makes its own set of decisions in its own way.
Many thanks, John. On this, I see as next question appearing here on Slido, and you have been also referring to it in your presentation on the recovery aspect that we have been trying to address, not only, if I may say so, the important aspects of the green transition, but with COVID coming in, and we are now in the middle of the recovery debate of recovery and resilience. So another anonymous question to you. Can you please elaborate on the Green Deal as a growth strategy and how the tensions between growth and sustainability are reconciled? And thanks to you, Claire, for the question.
Hi, Claire. I don't know which Claire it is, but all the Claires I know are continuously keeping me on my toes. As a society, somebody talked yesterday about the things we're learning from COVID, the lessons we're learning from COVID. Jo Swinnon was talking about the impact of the digitalization of the recovery has meant that it actually has had a huge impact not on capital, which is what happened in the last crisis, but on labour. In other words, working people are finding themselves put aside as we move into this hyper-speed, digitalised economy, which is very good for some people, but not for others. We're learning about what does this mean in terms of the next economy, the next society that we have. So part of this Green Deal strategy, and it is the growth strategy for the European Union, and not just in terms of economic growth, because what we mean by economic growth will have a different sense. It's not simply going to be the world we've had since the Trappists started doing the rotation of crops and the Industrial Revolution started using surpluses in the economy for investment, or the investment revolution around finance or capital in the last few years has brought so much and sometimes rather strange innovation into our lives. It's going to have to work within what we call planetary boundaries, and innovation will play a very important part in that. So there are limits to the way in which we use the life support systems on the planet to generate the value, to bring the economies to bear, and to make what are the common needs of people available. Take one example. If the European Green Deal is the growth strategy, how will we build an economy that is ready for climate adaptation? You've seen in California and Louisiana in the last couple of weeks the kind of issues we are going to have to deal with in all parts of the world. Firestorms, hurricanes, very extreme weather, the heat that we've had in the last few weeks. You will see drought in some parts of Europe and flooding in other parts of Europe. You see public health crises like COVID, which are emerging because of changes in the interaction between people and the environment. What kind of an economy, and whatever word you want to use around the economy, depending on where you come from the perspective, can be a functional, productive, profitable, whatever word you use, in an environment that will be so fundamentally different in terms of its assumptions? What does resilience mean in an economy? It's no longer about having enough of the right kind of suits and the fastest cars and the bubbliest champagne to keep the whole financial system going. We're talking in the long term about a very different kind of place, a place in which people are going to need to be able to have predictability in their lives. That means that we have science and observation, for example. Things like weather systems will have to be much more sophisticated in telling us where we live, how we live, and the ecosystems around that will have to protect us. So what we see as a conflict between sustainability and growth is going to have to become a growth strategy which is both sustainable, economic, and societally acceptable. And that's why the work we're doing in these research innovation calls is not simply about saying, here's a breakthrough here and a call there, but how are we to integrate these into a way of living which is both resilient. We know that we can't actually change some of the things that have already been set in store by our climate behaviour, which can decarbonise the economy in a way which is not simply good for the planet and everybody else, but there are people working in industries that are going to have to be supported and brought into different ways of doing what they do. The greening of industry, we look at steel, we look at other industries in the heavy industrial heart of Europe. We're going to need to have to look at what we don't think of as traditional nature-based solutions. The Rhine River dried to 20% of its capacity last summer at a critical point, which is an issue for both farming and food, but also for the transportation of what we make and produce and export from the heart of the European economy through Rotterdam and Antwerp and out to the rest of the world. We have to think in a joined-up way that we've never done before. And that's why the appeal in this call is to you who understand these complex systems, and they are systems, which now need to be adapted and transitioned, are going to have to find the levers to show the right directions. These are the ways that we can go. These are the things, by involving people, that we can actually sell a destination to people that is better for them, safer for them, and where they have a place in the economy and the society with their family and friends, and in the places that matter to them. So this is, I go on at length a little bit about this, but this is, somebody nearly termed the phrase yesterday, they're talking about natural capital, and somebody talked about natural capitalism, which will be probably where we'll get to in 2 generations. And by the way, the planet will be fine, it's just the rest of us that have to deal with this. So I see, Claire, that's really where this has got to be part of what we call sustainability in Europe. It's about the economy, society, and the ecology together. And that's why so much depends on the work that you're starting off today in this call.
Thank you very much, John. There's a huge interest, and I'm grateful for participants that you are focusing at now the strategic, broader political context and questions. We could go on and on. I have to look at the time. We have roughly 6 minutes. Still a lot of interesting questions. I would take 2, combine them, which are again from an anonymous participant. I think it's due to the IT system that not all names, or maybe to our data protection rules. The question about the budget for topics. One participant is mentioning they are, as compared to other calls, pretty high, 10 to 25 million. I guess, John, that's related to what you say at the beginning about the difference of the coal and the impact of focus. And linked to this, the question on delivering impact, what would you say, what would be for you a higher priority, demonstrating solutions or rather put the focus on products and services?
Okay, so I think, Bernd, you've kind of answered the question. The scale of the topics is related to the expectation and the difficulty. If you're going to do a very large nature-based solution, systemic approach, you can understand why they're at that scale, and the solutions to some of the issues are going to be quite big. It will vary depending on the topic. I think a lot of the impact here will be on demonstration of solutions. If products and services arise out of that, that's even better. But I think if you read carefully the text and really think creatively about what is it that we can bring. This is not business as usual we're talking about, and be bold. Somebody's asking about the social impacts. That will be hardwired into the way in which the calls are set out and evaluated. And the farm to fork question with the multi-actor approach, indeed, that will be one of the ways in which a number of the calls will try and mobilize a multi-actor approach.
Thank you very much, John. I was just about to ask you on the societal engagement. You've been also very much putting the focus also on the role of missions, which is also quite prominently discussed here in the Green Deal call. I'm looking here at the chat bar. There are also a number of quite detailed technical questions, which colleague will reply in the chat bar. As I said, we will have there are a lot of questions which are related to implementation aspects, where colleagues from the agencies will come in. Maybe a last question, which I've been seeing in a number of chats, which is posing the question: so within the Green Deal overall objective, decarbonization, where are we heading? Is it achievable by 2050? What will be the role of renewables, and how can the coal contribute to the overall decarbonization aspect, so that Europe can become a climate neutral continent, as also again confirmed by von der Leyen in her State of the Union speech? John.
So I think the President, in setting this new direction last year, was not setting out something which was an imagined destination. What we're hearing in our conversations across the different policy areas and the interactions with key stakeholders and industry across society and innovation is that we are going to get to that target by 2030, the 55% decrease by 2030. There is progress taking place. A large part of our world is already moving on this. They see there's an incentive, they see the benefits, they see the opportunity, they see the requirement, and they see where we're all heading. I think the bit from 2030 to 2050 is a different kind of question. Most countries have not taken a long-term decision about transitions that go beyond a political cycle, an investment cycle, even a generational cycle. I think the Netherlands in the Delta Works is probably the only example I can think of where a country has decided over 50 years to work on something. So, and this is why a lot of what comes out of this call will be very important for, I think the very important word here is de-risking. De-risking what are the ways and means of actually having a very substantive long-term impact by entirely new areas of innovation, technology, social interaction, ecosystems and other services, and in fact the greening of the industrial base, which in many, many areas will look absolutely different in terms of its impact on our planet and our society within a relatively short time. I think there's a number of things you can see. You mentioned renewable energies. We know there are issues around batteries that need to be resolved. There are issues around electrolysis in the case of hydrogen. In renewables, we can see where we're going in terms of wind and solar power and the scaling up. And we know that the kind of places we'll be living in, probably we will not be having solar-powered panels on the roofs of our homes in a few years' time. It'll be designed into the kind of materials that we use. So you will see the acceleration taking place. And I think for renewable energy, which is a critical first step, and mobility, and the automotive industry, which is a huge part of the European economy, I think things are moving more quickly perhaps than people had expected. Because once you set direction, in the European Union, if there's an inevitability about the destination, then there's a mobilization, and this is where research and innovation can accelerate that transition and make sure that it's more equitably understood and shared to all the parts of Europe and not just some of them.
John, many thanks. You have been extremely generous with the time. Thanks for allowing participants to have a little bit more time also for the Q&A. As I said, we try to answer most of the questions in the chat function. Many of the questions are related also to the next sessions where this certainly will come up. We are all also very curious, of course, to see about tomorrow's brokerage event. We will come back to you, John, to report also to you about the matchmaking.
Right.
The blind dates and the real dates for pitching then for the Green Deal call. So it's very encouraging to see the interest. Thank you very much for your questions, John, for your time.
Thank you very much, folks. Go get it, huh?
And you are going back with the bike probably now to the office, are you?
I am indeed. I have, sadly, I'm not moving as quickly on my bike as I used to, but yes, indeed, yeah. Thanks, Bernd.
John, many thanks for your time. Dear participants, we will now, as indicated in the agenda, move to the second part of the info session, and I'm happy to welcome our dear colleagues from the executive agencies. Sylvia Abad from REA. Good afternoon. We have hopefully Peter from INEA. I don't see his.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Sorry.
Yes, you are. Okay. I
have to get into the Wi-Fi, but I managed to.
Hi, Peter. Now I see you. Good to see you. And Victoria from EASME. Hello.
I'm on air.
Good afternoon. So our colleagues from the executive agencies, they will present to you now, also with the help of slides, I understand, the implementation aspects of the European Green Deal. I'm aware, of course, that you are very much interested into these important aspects which are related to potential applications, and no one is better placed than, of course, our three executive agencies who will be dealing then with the implementation phase to present you, and then they are also available for you at around 3:15 for half an hour to reply to your questions. Again, we will do it via Slido. I will try to moderate also the questions to the extent possible. Colleagues, can I hand over to you to start with the PowerPoint presentation? I think, Sylvia, you're going to start. The floor is yours.
Yeah, correct. Thank you. Can you all hear me?
Yes, we hear you well.
Okay, so good afternoon also from my side, and welcome to the second part on the presentation of the call. My name is Sylvia Abad. I'm co-coordinator in the Research Executive Agency. So after this interesting introduction on the Green Deal insights, indeed, we will move to the implementation aspects of the Green Deal call, where you can learn more practicalities for proposal submission and evaluation. The proposal will be divided into three parts. First, we will look at the evaluation procedure itself. Next, we will share the key points to submit successful proposal. And finally, we will give you an overview of the cross-cutting issues. So if you have any query from the presentation, do not hesitate to use the chat and indicate 1, 2, or 3, depending on the part your question relates. As the Green Deal call, evaluation will be mostly managed by the three executive agencies. We are here, EASME and REA, one representative of each with you today. So I'm glad now to move to the first part, evaluation procedure. So if colleagues, you can show the first slide. Exactly. So let's look at the evaluation timeline for the Green Deal call. As you already know, now the call deadline for all topics will be next 26 January at 5 p.m. Brussels time. It means that 1 second later, the submission portal will be closed and you will be no longer able to edit or update your proposal. So don't wait until the last minute to submit your proposal, please. After call deadline, the evaluation services in charge has 5 months to evaluate the proposal submitted under each area. So concluded the evaluations, applicants are informed on the results, and this will happen around mid-May. And successful applicant will be invited to sign the grant agreement within 8 months from the call deadline. So that's it, end of September, all grant agreement must be signed. On the next slide, please, colleagues. We can zoom in what happened during these 5 months of evaluation. So you submit your proposal, and first we check that your proposal is eligible and admissible. Some topics have additional eligibility criteria on top of the standard ones, so please check them out. The process is divided into 3 parts: an individual evaluation, a consensus group, and a panel review meeting. Only eligible proposals are allocated to expert in the evaluation tool. And before starting any assignment, experts need to declare absence of conflict of interest. Only then they can start the individual evaluation, which usually happen in remote. And then they come in agreement in the consensus phase. And this phase, it can be both remotely or in Brussels and on-site. The outcome of the whole exercise is a ranking list of proposals which needs to be formally endorsed by the Commission, and in parallel, proposals likely to be funded undergo an ethics screening. And once parent DGs agree with the proposed ranking, applicants are informed and receive the so-called evaluation summary report. So that's all what happened while you are waiting to receive some good news. On the next slide, please. In the Green Deal call, all topics will have a single submission mode. That is, you will need to submit a full proposal. And most of the topics are research innovation action and innovation action. Just a few topics are coordination and support action. And the different, RIA focus more on basic and applied research, technology development, and integration, testing and validation, but on a small scale prototype, while innovation action focus more on prototyping, testing, demonstrating, piloting, and large-scale product validation. The CSA is more centered on the networking measures. On the next slide, let me explain you what are the evaluation principles. So first is a fair and equal treatment. It means that all applicants receive the same information at the same time. So if we need to clarify something from a topic, we will do through a frequently asked question that will be posted in the funding and tender portal. And then it's accessible to all applicants. Next. The next principle is that proposals are evaluated based on the work program and the evaluation criteria. There is nothing else. Next one is that the evaluation is carried out by the independent expert, which are, of course, knowledgeable on the area, proved by the CV and the publication and citations. We also make sure that there is a balance in terms of gender, turnover from year to year, geographical diversity, and private versus public sector. And the fourth principle is the confidentiality. So the evaluation is a confidential process, and experts are briefed to not disclose any information related to the evaluation and only discuss with their peers. That's the evaluation principle. In the next slide, we see the award criteria. I'm sure that you are very familiar with the 3 evaluation criteria. You can press. So proposals are evaluated under 3 main criteria: excellence, impact, and quality and efficiency of the implementation. So how do experts evaluate your proposal? So experts are briefed to understand well the context, so the requirement, the expected impact, the scope of the challenge, and the evaluation criteria, so what is required under each sub-criteria. An expert only evaluate the proposal, so part A, part B, and any relevant annex. There is nothing else, no other source. What we made clear also is that the no-nego approach, that is, proposals are evaluated as submitted, so not on their potential if certain changes were to be made. It is not possible to give recommendation. On the next slide, please, we see the scoring scale. So based on the assessment that the expert provide, we also request them to give a score for each of the criterion. Each criterion is a score from 0 to 5, and half marks are also possible. So they can give 3.5, 4.5. 0 means that the proposal fails to address the criterion, while 5 means that the proposal covers all the relevant aspects in an excellent manner. And in between, we distinguish between a proposal having considerable number of shortcomings. While below 3, it entails that proposal has significant weaknesses. So all in all, in the frame of the evaluation, we distinguish between shortcomings and weaknesses. And finally, in the next slide, we have the scoring threshold. So each criterion has a minimum threshold of 3 out of 5 and a total of 10 out of 15. And in addition, innovation actions has a multiplying factor under impact. Only proposals that attain each and all thresholds are considered for funding. And when experts conclude the evaluation, the panel needs to reorder them. So when there are identical scores, experts look first at excellence and then at impact, and that's the case for RIA and CSA, while for innovation actions, it's first impact and then excellence. If there are still ties, we look at the size of the budget allocated to SMEs. That's all from my side. Thank you for your attention. I think I now give the floor to my colleague, Peter, who will provide us with the key points for successful proposal.
Thank you, Silvia. Good afternoon. Do you hear me?
Yes, Peter, we hear you well. Please go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Thanks a lot to Silvia for giving us a very good overview of the evaluation process. And I would like to spend the next 10 minutes to give you a few tips about how to make a good proposal. We know that you all want to make successful proposals. We also want to receive very good proposal. That's why our goals today coincide, and hopefully my presentation will be useful for you in order to get to to get to your successful proposal. So if we go to my slide, please. I would like first to say that although the Horizon 2020 calls are regular, we always receive very big interest, and we receive a lot more proposals than we can fund with our available funding. That's why what's important for you that to aim for the best, to aim for the highest score. Please do not waste your time if you are not sure that you can address 100% of the call requirement, because it's often that even very good proposals are not able to be funded. As well as please address all 3 evaluation criteria. Having high score in 1 or 2 criteria is still not sufficient. You need to have a good score in all 3 evaluation criteria in order to be in the top of the ranking. Next slide, please. Okay, first I would like to say that you need to understand very well the call text and the call conditions. As Silvia mentioned earlier, there are some specific eligibility conditions, which will be not only in the previous presentation, but also in the next session where my colleagues will explain in more detail the different calls. Please be aware that there might be some specific requirements, such as specific type of participant or international cooperation and so on and so forth. Don't forget to check that before you submit your proposal and to address it, of course. We know that when you submit your proposal, this is not coming out of nowhere. It is usually based on your line of research, but please build on your previous or current research project, but do not reinvent the wheel. Make sure that it is very clear in your proposal what this project will bring in terms of advancing the state of the art, and will be different from what already has been published or already at the moment is being researched. And be consistent throughout the whole proposal. If there are any inconsistency within the different section, the expert will pick up that and will, of course, that could have an impact on your score. Please, next button. Yes, I would like to mention to you also that you need to understand very well the call text. Address all requirements of the topics, but be careful about the wording. If certain elements need to be, shall or will be addressed by the participant, that means that they have to be in the proposal. But if we use a different word, like certain elements should be part of the proposal, then that means that they're not obligatory. However, if you don't address them, it's likely to refer to a lower score unless you justify why this is not applicable to your specific proposal. One more click, please. I would like to advise you, if you don't understand something, to ask questions, to consult, and as a first point of contact, you should use your national contact points. They usually have a lot of detailed information about different topics, and they can give you a very quick reply. As Silva mentioned, also check frequently asked question or pose your own question to the funding contender portal of the call. Next slide, please. Little bit more clicks, one and one more. Thank you. I would like to, not one slide back, I would like to stress that most of the proposals are about development of certain technology or development of certain solutions. So technical readiness level is very relevant to all of them, but please state it clearly what is the situation today or where your proposal starts and what would be situation at the end of the project. So what is your targeting technical readiness level? Please substantiate that with figures, with data in order to be credible. Okay, next slide, please. Impact is one of the very important element of Horizon 2020. Impact is essential for all our projects, and it is important that we see what would be the delivery, the outcome of the project beyond its end. So please substantiate your impact. Experts like to see figures or at least some credible calculation, but the credibility is a key word here. So do not claim impact which is not credible or not achievable. Next element is the plan for exploitation and dissemination. Please do not fall into the trap to reuse something which already has worked in the past. The dissemination and exploitation needs to be tailored for your own proposal, for your own action and result you're going to have out of it. And as we mentioned earlier, the innovation action have a higher weighting factor on the score, which means that that could make a difference in the final ranking list. That's why it's worth for, especially for innovation action, to spend more effort and timing on addressing the impact. Next slide, please. Thanks. When it comes to the implementation, the last criterion, it is, I would strongly advise you to be reasonable with the duration of your project. Please do not propose something which is extra stretch, extra short, if you are not sure you will be able to deliver in that time. And this is specifically relevant when there are actions such as getting available of demonstration site or engaging with the public, which are not fully controllable by the members of the consortium. Concerning the budget, we all know that the budget is estimation today, but the budget needs to be justified and try not to overestimate. If you fall into that type of overestimation, the expert will pick on this and that will have a negative effect of the final score. Then, like all projects, the risk is very important element which could mean successful or not successful project. So please, in your proposal, consider all important risk: technical, management, and administrative risk. The elements such as important partner leaving the consortium or important source of external funding disappearing during the project lifetime are important to be considered. Please address them and find appropriate mitigation actions, which needs to be part of your proposal in order to get more credible and higher score or implementation. And finally, about the consortium, I'd like to mention that do not think that the bigger means better consortium. What is important that your partner have sufficient expertise in order to implement the actions which you have put in the proposal and nothing else. You don't need any extra partner except that. Thanks. That's next slide, please. Well, I'd like to say just a few words about the presentation of your proposal. Please try to make it simple to digest by the expert. You all know the old saying that one picture is worth 1,000 words, and it goes long way here in presenting your proposal, especially in the circumstances when you are confined in terms of space. That's why please use graphics which are clear and explain your concept or your ideas, but please do not fall into the trap to make them too small in order to be readable by the expert. Make also presentation easy to follow. Be aware that our evaluators read often up to 10 or sometimes even more proposals, so make it easy for them to understand what are your main ideas and to follow your line of thoughts. Do not try to cram too much text or table or graphic into the page limit which you have for the proposal. Please respect the font size and the spacing, because if this is not respected, we will be obliged to convert anyway your proposal into the standard line spacing and the size of font, and what is outside of the page limit will not be given to the expert to evaluate. That's why respecting the page limit is important in order to read your whole proposal. And finally, remember that many of the evaluators are non-native English speakers. They have very good command in English, but that is not their mother tongue. That's why use easy, understandable, and clear language in order to convey your message with a stronger impact. And that's what I wanted to say today. Thank you very much, and I invite you for submitting questions if you have on this presentation. Thank you.
Victoria, now the floor is yours.
Hello, many thanks, Peter and Silvia, for this introduction. My part will complement a bit and focus on the cross-cutting issues of Horizon 2020 calls, but also because there could be newcomers to Horizon 2020. The Green Deal call, it's the last call in Horizon 2020, so it follows the principles of Horizon 2020. But then, as we saw from John Bell before his intervention, there's some specificities of the Green Deal call. So what I will try to do is to go through the main overarching general elements of Horizon 2020 and then pinpoint where there are some specificities for the Green Deal call. And all these general elements is very important for you to get familiar with them. I'm from MEASME, the other agency, and actually in my agency we are 2 units involved in the Green Deal call implementation. My colleagues from the Energy Horizon 2020 unit and my unit on Environment and Resources. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. I'm not sure if you see the slide or not, as I have some connection delays, but I will continue. So the Green Deal call, as I was saying, is a holistic call. And we saw from John Bell that really it wants to reap results. And the Green Deal call aims to encompass various sectors and even go beyond research and innovation. So this holistic approach has to be really embedded in your proposal. Some of the elements that you see here in the circles are already applicable to Horizon 2020 topics, but here they have to be combined together in the topics. As Peter was saying, it's very important to read carefully each of the topics, as the Green Deal call is quite overarching, and depending on the themes, energy, environment, etc., it can vary. So if we can go one slide back, please. Yes, so on the holistic approach, interdisciplinary is very important. So to bring knowledge, concepts from different disciplines together to solve the solutions. It is also very important that the research, it's participatory. So in Horizon 2020 calls, the research, public engagement, social innovation, co-creation, it's really at the heart of it. And in the Green Deal call, if you read through it, the transformational change, it's really embedded in the call. So this is a core element that you need to take into consideration. The second bubble, stakeholder knowledge and end user involvement. This is also very important in Horizon 2020 calls. The importance here is that beyond the normal academic disciplines, they're involved in the proposals early on in the design implementation. So really to have the buy-in from the stakeholders, for example, the farmers in the farm to fork. So really from the beginning and from the conceptual phase of your proposal, have these core elements really taken into consideration. And one element that also Peter touched a little bit is the idea of not to reinvent the wheel, to build on other projects and initiatives. But here the Green Deal call in many of the topics is very specific on that, to build on other projects, platforms, and to use EU services. For example, Copernicus and Galileo. So for example, in the wildfires topics, there's a reference to Copernicus. So to use the data for observation, disasters, climate, marine, so really to use the data from these EU services like Copernicus for the project implementation. So this holistic approach is central to the Green Deal call. We go to the next slide, please. So as we saw before, there's a big focus on demonstration, piloting and demonstration, and the Green Deal call has a large focus on large-scale demonstration. So it's very important in your proposals that you really justify why you're choosing those demonstrations, and you give details, the scale, the scope, etc., and how that ties in with the project. Later on in the afternoon, 4 to 6, you have all the specific topic presentations. And if you follow them, also really pay attention to the requirements of each of the topics, for example, on the permits and the some specific provisions. And on the piloting and demonstration, given that in many of the topics are innovation actions, also very important, the validation and the monitoring has to be at the center of the piloting and demonstration. Monitoring has to be really embedded into the whole design. If we go to the next slide, please. Yes, I see the piloting demonstration. To the next slide, please. Yes, and also for you, for newcomers to Horizon 2020, there's some cross-cutting priorities that are identified at the topics. So when you go in the funding and tender portal, you will there read the topic, and at the bottom you see the cross-cutting priorities. And these if they are relevant for the topic, they will be flagged and they will be evaluated by the evaluators. So it's very important for you to consider them. The two cross-cutting priorities, social sciences and humanities, in this case is when the topic is quite a challenging topic and you need to bring in economics, governance, cultural disciplines. So social sciences and humanities are needed for the intervention actions. And the gender analysis, this is not a gender balance. This is that the actions will have a different effect and can have different finding in women and men. And this, if the topic has been gender flagged, this will also be evaluated. So really look into these cross-cutting priorities. In the hyperlinks, you can also read more information about them. So we go to the next slide, please. I think the next slide is on international cooperation. Apologies, but when I see the screen, I have a bit of delay. So I'm not sure if you already are seeing the next slide, because I'm not seeing it, but I will continue. So international cooperation, Peter already mentioned it. Horizon 2020 it's open to the world. So there's a strategy for international cooperation, and the Green Deal call, it's also it's aligned with this international cooperation. And if you read the Green Deal call at the beginning, it really stresses the importance of international cooperation and how it needs to address the needs of developing countries, for example, Africa. For international cooperation, you also have to really pay attention to the topics. Here, I'm just going to go through different modalities of international cooperation you can have, but really pay a good look at each of the topics. One is when international partners are mandatory. This means that there will be eligibility conditions for them. In this case, the topic on 2.3 on green transition and energy in Africa, there would need to be legal entities from Africa. Then another modality is project twinning. In this case, in the topic on innovative cities, the topic test encourages project twinning with other international partners. Another different modality is a case when third countries are not eligible for funding, but they want to take part in the call, and they bring their own funding as sort of co-funding matching. This is already what happens in Horizon 2020 when there's some cooperation arrangements with some countries like India, etc. And in this call, I'm pleased to confirm you that the India committed to provide co-fund for the successful Indian entities. In the link I've put in the presentation, you can find more information. And Indian entities would participate in a number of topics. For example, they have an interest on renewable energies or circular economy. The most common modality you will see in the topics is international cooperation is encouraged. And some of the topics might even say with which international countries. So there will be precision. And this is, for example, the case on the wildfires topic, that it specifically mentions some countries like Australia, where international cooperation is encouraged. In this last aspect, is not an eligibility criterion, but this will be taken into consideration in the evaluations. So please really also when you are coming up with your proposal, bring in the added value and really have an approach to international cooperation to make the case for it. In the next slide, please. You already see it, you can see a map where you can see all those countries which are automatically eligible for funding. You can see that all EU member states and then the 16 accession countries which are automatically also eligible for funding and are in the same conditions as the member states. And then we also have some other third countries which are not automatically eligible for funding. And these are industrialized countries and emerging economies like India, US, Canada. So if they apply, there's two options, like the case we were saying with this co-funding mechanism, but exceptionally, they can also receive some EU funding, but this it's in two cases, if it's really written in the work program or if it's specifically really essential for the project. For example, a third country has research infrastructure that is critical for the proposal. So really take this into account, but consider that the evaluators will assess if the participation of those third countries are essential or not. So be prepared for a plan B. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. So now we go into some also general elements of Horizon 2020 that you need to be familiar or aware when you're applying to this call. And these include the open access and the ethics. So on the first slide, if you already see the open access. So the open access, provides online access to research results. And in Horizon 2020, there's a pilot. And the approach is to make research data as open as possible and closed as less, only as necessary. The open access pilot, the idea really is to maximize the use of research results. And the benefit is win-win for all. For proposals, also this gives you more visibility, influential, sharing with other researchers, and having research data open also increases the opportunities for accelerates innovation, and also is being transparent and bringing on board the citizens and the society. So really the open access in Horizon 2020, it really aims to maximize the impact of R&I funding. What I really want to specify is the participation in this pilot is not part of the evaluation, so you will not be penalized. But you can, the costs are all eligible. So when you're preparing your proposal, if you want to take this approach, all the costs are eligible. And there in the slide, I put the part of the proposal B where details can be included. So these elements it's good that you are familiar with them. The next slide, please, which takes us to the ethics that my colleague Silvia already mentioned a little bit. So ethics, it's an integral part of research. Ethics compliance, it's seen as a pivotal in research. So for all the projects that will pass the evaluation, there will be an ethics screening. You can find more information on the online manual on this, but what I really wanted to tell you already now at the proposal stage is that you will have to fill in an ethics self-assessment when you're preparing your proposal. So get familiar with it. There's a functional mailbox that can help you. And there's also a guide on how to fill in this ethics self-assessment when you're preparing your proposal. So we hope these sort of overarching elements of Horizon 2020 for the newcomers of this call, that this information is useful. But if you have questions, please do send them to us or have a look at the online Horizon 2020 manual. If we go to the next slide, please. I wanted to also share with you all the wealth of information that can be looked at when you prepare the proposals, in addition to reaping the benefits of the matchmaking that will take place tomorrow and all the contacts you have, and also the national contact points that Peter was saying. The Horizon 2020 and previous programs has lots of platforms that can support you to search for partners, to search for relevant results, to have a look and dig. So on this slide, perhaps I would mention two, that the most important one, the CORDIS, which is the European Commission Dissemination Platform for all the research results, and the new one, the Horizon Results Platform. This is a novelty in the sense that you can have a look at results, so key exploitable results, projects that are finishing or as they are advancing. They include their relevant results, let it be scientific, policy related, and you can filter with the name of a project or with a keyword in the thematic you are interested in. So please do take your time. Writing a proposal is very lengthy, so we recommend you to start already from now, from day one. Also in INEA and EASME, we have some data hubs that you can also search for partners and projects. And my last slide, please. We've mentioned it in a couple of times, but it's the Horizon 2020 online manual. And in this manual, you can go through some of the comments, some of the sections that we've explained. It's really well prepared in the sense that as there's a wealth of information, you can really break it down and go through the section you're interested, let it be ethics, international cooperation. And as we've said before, there's the functional mailbox on the research inquiry service. So please do send your questions there. If you have general ones, there's also FAQ from previous calls that many questions on the application, on the templates, etc. So you can also have a look at that database. And all the best for the proposal write-up and the consortium setup. We wish you all the best. Thank you.
A big thanks, Sylvia, Peter, Victoria, for your very comprehensive presentation. I think it was super useful for the participants from your perspective who are dealing on a daily basis with the implementation of the projects. I think this was extremely informative for all of us. I would like also to point out that the three agencies you've been involved, you've been actively participating also in when we were thinking about the design of the call, and we have been very grateful for the good cooperation. I think the fact also that your three agencies are involved demonstrates the wide scope of the call, what we are targeting, what we are addressing with the Green Deal objectives. And in order to achieve the tangible results, the impacts to which John has been referring, it's of course extremely important that we get the best quality projects, and I think your explanations have helped a lot to clarify. So thanks again for this very good presentation. We have roughly 20 minutes for Q&A before we will go into a virtual break. Before I come to the first question, I would just like to come back to the comments which were related to the UK. We've put it already in the chat bar, but I would also like already just to reconfirm again that with respect to Horizon 2020, if you look at the withdrawal agreement, so UK-based legal entities will continue to be fully eligible to participate and to receive funding in the current program, so including Horizon 2020, including the Green Deal call, as if the UK were a member state, so until the closure of these programs. This means that UK beneficiaries, of course, then can continue to receive grants awarded under the current and under the previous MFF programs. We thought it would be useful just to state this, as we see that among the more than 3,000 participants, there are a lot of colleagues over the channel. So we look forward to receiving also from you your application if you continue to be interested. If I may turn to some of the questions. The first one for you, Peter. I see you in the middle between the two ladies. So the first question to you from Anonymous. So you're getting an anonymous question, Peter. I also wonder about the previous results. Must the proposal be an extension of an earlier project? Now I see it's not so anonymous. It's Alexandre Petrescu. Sorry, you are not anonymous. You are recognizable. Peter, What would you reply to this?
Well, as already was mentioned later on by Patricia, I think that there's some of the calls which are specifically mentioning that the proposal needs to be based on already existing either already existing EU-funded initiatives. I think she was mentioning certain initiatives such as Galileo, certain initiatives such as using of data observation systems, but they don't necessarily need to be extension of a previous research. But obviously, if you have a proposal which needs to develop, let's say, certain technology or certain solution from a technical readiness, let's say 4 or 5 to technical readiness 6 or 7, they will need to be based on some kind of a previous research. It's not, of course, prerequisite that they are based on the previous European project. They could be funded by the participant own means or a national program, and so on and so forth.
Many thanks, Peter, for replying to the question from Alexandre. I have here a question. It could probably for Victoria, I'll read it loud. Horizon 2020 is primarily aimed at medium to large consortia led by research institutes, technical experts, and universities. So NGOs, CSOs are usually involved only as partners. Can they now also lead on some of the areas? Can you reply to this question, maybe Victoria?
Yes.
Thank you.
It would depend also on the topic, because the topics are very different. It's not the same, the one on energy or the ones on the cross-cutting ones that we have more on, so with the societal transformation. So really, the answer is depends on the topic. Have a look at it. And especially the last ones, the cross-cutting ones, it could be that they could also, there's nothing stopping from that. I would recommend also that this question is put forward in the next session, specifically to those topics that are more focusing on the societal challenges, the cross-cutting ones, to the relevant colleagues. But in principle, it should be possible. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Victoria. Indeed, in area 9 and 10, this might be particularly relevant, so I'm sure this question will come up. Victoria, can I maybe stay with you? I think there has been already something answered, but I think it's an interesting question to clarify from one of our participants. What does it mean exactly, project twinning? Could you explain it to us? What is meant with this?
Yes. This is specifically related to that topic on innovative cities. So I would recommend that you look at this topic, because the cities, they have a few case studies. So what the idea is that some projects that are more advanced, sort of they twin, and there's sort of peer-to-peer learning. And there's a specific mention in this topic to twinning with international partners in that topic. The one on innovative cities.
Many thanks for this. I see a general question has been raised about. I think, for example, Doris Bell raised it. What does it mean? What is it about additional evaluation criteria? What is exactly meant with this? Sylvia, you had on your slides, you were talking about the evaluation criteria. Can you maybe elaborate on this and reply to Doris?
Yeah, sure. Indeed, in the work program, sometimes there are some additional eligibility criteria that it's good that you look at it. For instance, there are some topics that call for collaboration with specific countries. It can be Brazil, for instance, or it can be even continent. And some topics require the participation of partners from 4 regions of Africa, or 5 participants from Africa. So these are requirements that make the proposal eligible or not. So that's the first thing you need to look at when composing your consortium, just to be sure that you fulfill all the requirements in relation to the eligibility criteria. I think this is what she was referring to.
Okay, many thanks. I'm sure in the second part, when we are going into the thematic areas, there will be, of course, then also more concrete questions to the concrete areas. I've been picking up also from the first part. I don't know who of you can or would like to answer, and this is something we've also often received. And when we were doing presentations, looking at the relatively high budget per topics, is it possible to indicate already to the participants how many projects per topic will be financed under the call? Is it something we can say in advance? Would any one of the three of you like to answer? Maybe Peter, back to you.
I can add something there.
Yeah.
I can add something there. It is nothing written black and white, simply because it is, of course, it very much depends on what are the costs, what is the EU contribution of the best proposals. We know in the work program what is the funding for a certain topic, and the participants sometimes are guided by saying, well, the Commission considered that funding between, let's say, X and Y million would be sufficient for addressing this challenge. So they could, if they assume that most of the proposals, and at least the one which are on the top, have that type of funding, then they could more or less calculate how many proposals will be funded. But that is only guessing, because sometimes it is possible that the highest ranking proposal has requested higher budget than what was recommended. And if that budget is considered to be justified, and it has and is been really matching what the proposal is doing, and what proposal is doing is also within the call scope, then it's possible that there is, for example, less than expected number of proposal funded, number of project funded, or the other way around, it could be more. So this is only a kind of preliminary guess, which participants make the same way as we do, because obviously we don't know how big would be the proposal who are on the top, or which are on the top of the ranking list. I don't know whether my colleagues want to add something.
Victoria, Silvia, would you like to add something, complement?
No, I think he explained very well. It's true that it depends very much on the consortium, the requested budget. The orientation from the Commission is there in the work program. There are topics that have subtopics. Each of one have as indicative that only the best ranked proposal should be funded, and also considering the coverage of all subtopics. So it really depends on the requested budget by participants.
Mm-hmm. Many thanks for this. Victoria, I have a question which is related here to the use of the Copernicus climate change service. The question is where the call topic requests that project make use of this service. Is it then expected that they will be partners in the consortium? Can you say something on this, Victoria?
No. Yes, they're not expected to be partners, but in many of the topics, because of the sort of the holistic approach and the large scale of the projects, it really needs to plug into EU services, platforms, etc., to capitalize from them. So we've seen it in a few of the topics. For example, the wildfires that my agency is involved, we saw a specific mention on it. get the data for natural disasters, climate change, etc. So there's not a requirement for them to be partners, but it's very emphasized the need for take-up and the use of all these services and to use these services. But again, this might not be applicable to all the topics, depends on the nature of the topics. So we recommend that you go into each one. Why we introduce it is because the Green Deal call, it's very ambitious and very overarching, and this holistic approach that the projects with 20 million, for example, they need to plug into these other EU services and platforms. So we wanted to share with you so you are aware, but then for the specificities, please go to the text and go to each of the topics.
Many thanks, Victoria. We are getting in a lot of questions. Time is limited. We will have to conclude in 5 minutes. I would try to take still two. It could be for Sylvia from REA. I guess the question is, some of the specific topics are set up as big programs and then with a cascade of smaller projects. Could you elaborate a little bit more on this cascading model?
Well,
Sylvia?
indeed, there are some. Yeah. Indeed, there are some topics that request funding cascade. It has to be specific in the topic text, and it's in the topic text where you should receive not only the technical information, but also to which users this cascade funding goes to. In our case, for instance, it goes usually to farmers. And the consortium need to specify already at the proposal submission how they apply. They need to go through the general Annex H of the work program. Please check it out. There is some conditions to apply this cascade funding, and it's a bit complicated. It's not always well understood by consortium how it works, and then how experts should evaluate at the proposal stage. But by following the Annex H and the specificities of the topic text, I think you will find it depends on every topic. So I don't know whether it clarifies.
Sylvia, I think that's a good explanation for all of us. Looking at the time, Peter, I hope if it's okay for you that we finish with you. With one question, which is again related to budget. The question is, if a topic has a broad budget range and many expected impacts on the scope, can a proposal focus on some of those requirements and ask for a smaller budget, or should it meet all requirements looking for a bigger budget?
Well, I'm trying to understand the question. So if there is a topic with a broad range of a budget, let's say between 5 and 10 million or between 10 and 20 million, and there are more than one requirement. So I mentioned that in my presentation earlier, that it's important to understand the topic text. So I think that will be even more important now to listen to the presentations in half an hour or so. And what is important to understand, what are the obligatory requirements? So what is shall, what is the proposal will? And then if there is if there are other elements such as using such as, or for example, these are elements which could be all of them, not necessarily all of them to be considered, but only one or more be considered. So that means that, of course, obviously the smaller scope of the project could be call text could be addressed. It is difficult for me to answer the question very concretely without having a bit more concrete example in mind. But in principle, there is no obligation to have the budget requested only to have budget requested according to the one which is already indicated into the topic text. What is important to realize, though, that if the topic text say, well, the prospective project should request something between 5 and 10 million, and if the proposal requests 20 million, they might risk to be in a situation where, although they are very high ranking into the ranking list, they may not have enough funding to be funded. The other situation, when they request too little budget, they might be in a situation when during the project execution they realize that in fact they have cut the line too tightly and they don't have enough budget to complete the project, which is also an unfavorable situation. That's why, as I mentioned earlier, they need to be realistic and justifiable in estimation of their budget.
Thanks a lot, Peter, and also again a big thanks to Silvia, Victoria. This was extremely useful, a very practical insight on the implementation aspects of this really big call. Dear colleagues, dear participants, we are coming to an end. We are quite punctual, if I look, 3:45, so I think we have all deserved not only a virtual coffee, tea, but a physical one to refill our energy after this interesting session. Just to recall that part 2 will resume in 10 minutes. It's going to be, as you know, closed sessions, allowing up to 100 participants for the different sessions. And again, I wanted also to repeat, don't forget tomorrow the brokerage event where you can pitch between 9 and 11, and we have also arranged for you the possibility for face-to-face meetings if the cameras will work from 11 to 13. So once more, a big thanks, Silvia, Victoria, Peter. Thanks to you participants for your active engagement, your interest. And we will be looking forward, of course, with you to continue the dialogue and the discussions in the next sessions. I wanted also to thank colleagues which are behind the cameras, the teams who have been helping us to run this session. In my team, Davida Art, the big team in the executive agencies team. A big thanks also to the technical team here. So we can close this first part. Thanks a lot, and now have a good coffee, tea, water, or whatever you're gonna drink. I will leave this tent. It looks a bit like Christmas atmosphere behind me, but I can tell you it's pretty warm inside the tent, so I will need now some fresh air before I come back. Thanks a lot. All the best. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much.